Okay, here we are back again with more Dragon Age 2, and I think we are long overdue for a Codex episode, mostly because I say so. Um, we have a lot to get through. Oh my lord. I'm mostly going to focus on the lore stuff because that's really the in-depth kind of stuff that's really interesting and isn't necessarily obvious, but it's like background information and world building, and it's really fun. So yeah, let's just go through the ones we haven't read yet, or try to. We'll see how much we get done in 40 or so minutes. So this is Death of a Templar, which we just recently picked up. The dry, dusty earth swallows up salty drops that splatter its surface. A tiny insect pauses, sensing the vibrations, and scurries off, leaving behind its invisible enemy. As the drops fall, the dark circles merge together, expressing a mirror to their creator. The primal emotions of bloodlust and sorrow blend into a lethal cocktail that breaks the strongest of men. The jurisdiction of strength must be left to the spirit, not arm nor chest. Only the wisest turn to his inner sanctuary to partition the mind from an all-consuming madness. Seductive voices whispering promise of glory weighting down the weaker path of the flesh, bringing a death far worse than that of hot lead or steel. These blank, hollow promises will echo the unfathomable eternally. Living comfortably amongst material possessions, it is easy to misunderstand the true meaning of uncontrollable hate. Failing to understand the power of fighting against pure, unfaltering beliefs, against foes that listen only to their soul, uncontrollable hate, influenced and thus removed from innocence. The scar is permanent and internal. The rain, now red, feeds the debt owed for actions past, seeking further into the earth as the mind draws slower. What was it that drew himself, to this situation? The mind ebbs and parts to a lingering memory of true innocence. He entered war as a newborn enters the world, unknowing of both the horrors and light of the Maker that will save him. The sound of metal sliding along leather comes from above him. From the second he was born to his soon-to-be dying breath, his mind was processing and analyzing knowledge and experiences. It is true that he thought he could be wise in his own eyes, but only the most humble recognizes that he knows very little. Bias, speculation, and all of false pretenses make way to the sound of the sweeping steel, and then finally his soul, as ready as his eyes dry from this final understanding, enters his promise of its purest form. From Death of a Templar by Sir Andrew, Knight of Andraste and Templar Archivist, 9-4 Dragon. That's very philosophical sounding. Here's some interesting one about the Thetis calendar. For most good folk, the details of our calendar have little purpose. It is useful only for telling them when the summer day festival will be held, when the snows are expected to begin, and when the harvest must be complete. The naming of the years are a matter for historians and taxmen, and few, if pressed, could even tell you the reason that our current age is named after dragons. It is 930 Dragon Age, the 30th year of the 9th age since the crowning of the Chantry's first divine. Each age is exactly 100 years, with the next age's name chosen in the 99th year. The scholars in Val Royeaux advise the Chantry of portents seen in that 99th year, and Chantry authorities pore over the research for months before the divine announces the name of the imminent age. The name is said to be an omen of what is to come, of what the people of Thetis will face for the next 100 years. The current age was not meant to be the Dragon Age. Throughout the last months of the Blessed Age, the Chantry was preparing to declare the Sun Age, named for the symbol of the Orlesian Empire, which at that time sprawled over much of the south of Thetis and controlled both Ferelden and what is now Navarra. It was to be a celebration of Orlesian imperial glory. But as the rebellion in Ferelden reached a head and the Battle of River Dane was about to begin, a peculiar event occurred. A rampage, the rising of a dreaded high dragon. Dragons had been thought practically extinct since the days of the Navarran dragon hunts, and they say that to see this great beast rise from the frostbacks was both majestic and terrifying. As the rampage began and the high dragon decimated the countryside in its search for food, the elderly divine Faustine II abruptly declared the Dragon Age. Some say the divine was declaring support for Orlais in the battle against Ferelden, since the dragon is an element of the Dufile family heraldry of King Megran, the so-called usurper king of Ferelden. Be that as it may, the High Dragon's rampage turned towards the Orlesian side of the Frostback Mountains, killing hundreds and sending thousands more fleeing to the northern coast. The Ferelden rebels won the Battle of River Dane, ultimately securing their independence. Many thus think that the Dragon Age will come to represent a time of violent and dramatic change for all of Thedas. It remains to be seen. Hilariously, I like that it's like, at the beginning it's like, this is 930 Dragon Age, but then it says it was actually written in 925. 5 years ago, okay. City Elves. When the Holy Exalted March of the Dales resulted in the dissolution of the Elven Kingdom, leaving a great many elves homeless once again, the divine Renata I declared that all lands loyal to the Chantry must give the elves refuge within their own walls. Considering the atrocities committed by the elves at Red Crossing, this was a great testament to the Chantry's charity. Yeah, okay, whatever. There was one condition, however. The elves were to lay aside their pagan gods and live under the rule of the Chantry. Some of the elves refused our goodwill. They banded together to form the Wandering Dalish Elves, keeping their old elven ways and their hatred of humans alive. To this day, Dalish elves still terrorize those of us who stray too close to their camps. Most of the elves, however, saw that it was wisest to live under the protection of humans. Yeah, sure. And so we took the elves into our cities and tried to integrate them. We invited them into our own homes and gave them jobs as servants and farmhands. Here in Denerim, the elves even have their own quarter governed by an elven keeper. Most have proven to be productive members of society. Still, a small segment of the elven community remains dissatisfied. These troublemakers and malcontents roam the streets, causing mayhem, rebelling against authority, and making a general nuisance of themselves. So that's a really nice take on the elves? No, it's not. It's not nice at all, but it's a good example of the in-universe biases that come out in the Codex, which I really enjoy, actually. I like the fact that we get that all of this stuff is written in-universe and thus has a very specific biases based on who was writing it and when they were writing it and, you know, who they were writing it for, right? We've been dealing with the Enigma of Kirkwall, right? I think so. I think we've been dealing with that. The Enigma of Kirkwall is just that. It's an enigma. There's not really much to say about it. Glitter Dust and Orichalcum, I think we've got. Some Deep Road stuff. There isn't a dwarf alive who remembers the Deep Roads as they once were. They were the network of tunnels that joined the tides together. To be honest, it isn't even right to give them such a simple term as tunnels. They are works of art, with centuries of planning demonstrated in the geometry of their walls, with the statues of the paragons that watch over travelers, with the flow of lava that keeps the deep roads lit and warm. The cloud gazers up on the surface talk of the imperial highway built by the magisters of old, a raised walkway that crossed thousands of miles, something that could only have been built by magic. Perhaps it is comparable to the deep roads, although we dwarves didn't need magic. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. The Darkspawn rule the deep roads now. When Orzammar sealed off the entrances to the deep roads, abandoning everything that lay out there, we handed over the kingdom that was to those black bastards forever. To think that there are Genlocks crawling over Bonamar now, tearing down our statues and defiling our greatest works. Corruption covers everything we built out there. Every dwarf who goes out and comes back says that it gets worse with each passing year, the foulness spread a little further. And the cloud gazers think the Darkspawn are gone just because they aren't spilling out onto the surface. One day, when Orzammar is gone for good, they'll find out differently. Those Darkspawn won't have anywhere else to go but up, and they'll do it. The surface folk will have themselves a blight that will never end. Transcript of a conversation with a member of the Dwarven Mining Caste, 890 blessed. Some excerpts from the Qun, actually. When the Ashkari looked upon the destruction wrought by locusts, he saw at last the order in the world. A plague must cause suffering for as long as it endures. Earthquakes must shatter the land. They are bound by their being. Asit Taleb, it is to be. For the world and the self are one. Existence is a choice. A self of suffering brings only suffering to the world. It is a choice, and we can refuse it. Here's some interesting things on Sarabas, which are the Kunari mages. The Kyun teaches that all living things have a place and a purpose, and only when they are in the correct place and in control of their own self may a being attain balance. When balance is lost, suffering follows. Mastery of the self is, therefore, the first and greatest duty. Those born with magic are at a terrible disadvantage, for demons can always rob them of their self. Because of this, the Kunari name them Sarabas, meaning dangerous thing, and treat them with the utmost caution. Sarabas must be carefully controlled by someone else, an Arvarad, one who holds back evil, because they cannot truly control themselves. The evil is not the mage, but the loss of the mage's self, and the suffering that inevitably follows. The Kunari pity and honor the Sarabas, for striving while under constant threat from within is truly selfless, which is the highest virtue of the Kyun. From the writings of the Seer of Kantar, 841 Blessed. I don't know that that's honoring them, to be perfectly honest. But okay. Here's one on Talvishath. Being lost in an ancient Tevinter ruin in northern Ravane is highly overrated. And then I found myself beset by several bands of Kunari, apparently working in concert. I fled and managed to hide in a little village by the name of Vindar. The people there, mostly humans and a few elves, were devout followers of the Kyun. It was the most organized village I ever laid eyes on. The houses were identical and arranged along perfectly orthogonal lines. The fields were well tended and apparently communal. There were signs of damage everywhere, as if the town had suffered repeated sieges, buildings shattered, fields burned, and a great many empty houses. I spent the night in the home of Vindar's matriarch, who introduced herself only as Seer. When I tried to regale my hostess with the tale of my Kunari assailants, I discovered something. Kunari, Seer said, are people who follow the Kyun, her people. Those born into Kunari society who reject the Kyun are called Vashath, which means grey ones. These grey ones must leave their homes, for they have no place among the Kunari. Sadly, many turn against the society that cast them out. These outcasts call themselves Talvishath, the true grey ones. Often they have no skills to make an honest living, so they sell themselves into service, usually becoming mercenaries. Even the most inept fighter among the Kunari race possesses prodigious size and an intimidating visage. These, she informed me, were my attackers in the countryside, the same band that wreaked such havoc on Vindar. The Talvishath wage a bitter war against the Kyun, the Kunari, and sometimes against Order itself. They are no match for the Kunari army, so they generally strike at farms, travelers, and those who stray too far from Kunari protection. I was lucky to escape with my life. So that's my brother Genitivi. So he has a bit of a sense of humor. I can see he's retained his sense of humor a little bit. I guess that's still from In Pursuit of Knowledge, but still. I always liked brother Genitivi. The Magisters of Tevinter. Before it became the Imperium, Tevinter was ruled by a dynasty of kings, and long before the Chantry there was a Circle of Magi, the Society of Mages, in each city. The titles our modern circles use, Enchanter, Senior Enchanter, First Enchanter, all originated here. But above the First Enchanter, the Circles of Tevinter had another office, Magister. The Magisters formed a council of the most powerful mages in the kingdom. They convened in Minrathus and held dominion over all magic in the land. When Dorinia seized the throne in minus 1195 Ancient, the court of the Magisters became the royal court, and Magister was the only title of nobility recognized in Tevinter. The Imperium today is a magocracy. Political power is solely in the hands of the Magisters, who come only from the ranks of the Circle. Every young mage aspires to be a Magister's apprentice because it's the best chance of ascending to the rank of Magister themselves. That's by Sister Patrine. Here's one about slavery in Tevinter. So slavery still thrives in Thedas, even if the trade has been outlawed. Who hasn't heard the tales of poverty-stricken elves lured into ships by the prospect of well-paying jobs in Antiva, only to find themselves clapped in leg irons once at sea? And humans fall prey to this too. If they're lucky, they end up in Orlais, which has only servants. Most nobles treat them decently because they are afraid of admitting the truth. Orlesians go to great lengths to maintain the fiction that slavery is illegal. Of course, the greatest consumer of slave labor is the Tevinter Imperium, which would surely crumble if not for the endless supply of slaves from all over the continent. There, they are meat, chattel. They are beaten, used as fodder in the endless war against the Kunari, and even serve as components in dark magic rituals. Yeah, I would say that's true. So here's about that tree that we were talking about in the alienage. Venedal. Mostly the old ways are gone. Each generation forgets a little more of the old tongue, a little more of the traditions, and the few things we keep become simple habits, the meaning long since faded. So it is with the Venedal, the tree of the people. Every alienage has one, I'm told, or they used to. When I was a little girl, my mother told me the tree was a symbol of Arlathan, but not even she knew more. Keeping the Venedal is just a habit now. Many cities have let theirs wither and die, then chopped them up for firewood. No great loss. Huh. Here's some fun stuff on the Grey Wardens, which I'm sure we already know because we've all watched my Let's Play of Dragon Age Origins. Yes? Yes. The first Blight had already raged for 90 years. The world was in chaos. A god had risen, twisted and corrupted. The remaining gods of Tevinter were silent, withdrawn. What writing we have recovered from those times is filled with despair, for everyone believed, from the greatest archons to the lowliest slaves, that the world was coming to an end. At Weishaupt Fortress in the desolate Anderfels, a meeting transpired. Soldiers of the Imperium, seasoned veterans who had known nothing their entire lifetimes except hopeless war, came together. When they left Weishaupt, they had renounced their oaths to the Imperium. They were soldiers no longer. They were Grey Wardens. The Wardens began an aggressive campaign against the Blight, striking back against the Darkspawn, reclaiming lands given up for lost. The Blight was far from over, but their victories brought notice, and soon they received aid from every nation in Thedas. They grew in number as well as reputation. Finally, in the year 992 of the Tevinter Imperium, upon the Silent Plains, they met the Archdemon Dumat in battle. A third of all the armies of northern Thedas were lost to the fighting, but Dumat fell and the Darkspawn fled back underground. Even that was not the end. The Imperium once revered 7 gods: Dumat, Zazikel, Toth, Andorhal, Razikale, Lusican, and Orthemiel. 4 have risen as archdemons. The Grey Wardens have kept watch through the ages, well aware that peace is fleeting, and that their war continues until the last of the dragon gods is gone. Yeah. It's interesting to think about, though, of course, and I'm sure you've seen my Let's Play of Dragon Age Origins Awakening, but there is some debate as to whether, if, the other 3, Tevinter gods were to awaken as archdemons and all of them were to be defeated, would that end the Blights forever, or would it, lead to something even worse? It's hard. Nobody knows. Since, nobody really knows where the Blights came from in the first place. Anyway, here's a Codex entry about Andraste, Bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathous, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true God did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband, Maferath, and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together, they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself. Fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until they were a vast tide washing over the Imperium. And when Maferath saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last, the armies of Andraste and Maferath stood before the very gates of Minrathous, but Andraste was not with them, for Maferath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Tevinter. For this, the Archon would give Maferath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. And so, before all the armies of the Alamari and of Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Maferath, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits still at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children. And that's a sermon, of course. So that's a very sanitized and simplistic version of the story of Andraste, as is told in sermon form by Justinian II. Like everything else in Dragon Age, the story is probably a lot more complicated and nuanced than the Chantry would have us believe. Was Maferath jealous of his wife, or were they actually not all that successful in their military campaign, and he knew that they could never actually take down Tevinter, so maybe he made a bargain with them in order to save, as many people as he could. Hard to say. An honest answer regarding apostates. A mage who does not receive the teachings of the Circle and who does not have the words of Andraste in her heart is an apostate, and a danger to us all. Without the guidance of the Holy Chantry, a mage may foolishly dabble in the darker arts, blood magic, or demon summoning, thus becoming Maleficarum, and a mage's mind will ever be a doorway to spirits of the Fade. Without proper instruction, this doorway remains open and unsecured. If a demon should come through this doorway and possess a mage, an abomination is created. Abominations know only madness. They cannot be reasoned with and will slaughter man, woman, and child without thought. Whole cities have fallen to these creatures. Thousands have died at their hands. The Chantry and her Templars have a duty to ensure that this does not happen. If I knew a better way to deal with magic, I would seize upon it immediately. You say we should let the mages guard themselves. I tell you that this is no solution. Look at the Tevinter Imperium. Their magisters do not know restraint. Without Chantry oversight, the magisters abuse their power. Those without magic are trampled underfoot and forced to serve. Slaves are slaughtered by the hundreds to feed the magisters' hunger for power. Even some mages are not spared, for in mages, as in all humans, there exists a spectrum. On one end, the very powerful, on the other, those that can barely light a candle. The Empire cares only for the strongest, and those who do not compare favorably are thrown to the wolves. Imagine your children growing up in such a world. If a mage asked it of you, you would have to give him your daughter, not knowing what his plans for her might be. You could not resist him, and neither could she. Without our Templars and without the Circle, the common man would have no defense against magic. We must deny the mages certain freedoms for the common good. I wish there was another way. I tell the apprentices this is a test of their faith, that it is the will of the Maker. Many understand that we do what we do for their own good. So, excerpt of a letter from Grand Cleric Francesca of Starkhaven to Lord Guthrie Abbols. So that's an interesting take on the mage question. It's hard to argue with that. Aside from the fact that there's also a lot of room for abuse in the the system of, Templars and circles and whatnot, as is pretty plainly obvious by what we've seen so far in Kirkwall, and we'll probably see even more of it. Templars also have a lot of power over their charges, and that's definitely open to abuse without a lot of oversight. I think I don't think there is a perfect system, a system that would work perfectly in a case like this. Mages are certainly very dangerous. And if, there's always going to be that one guy who ruins it for everybody, right? Who decides, I'll just set us a village on fire because I'm a cruel son of a bitch, right? But there's certainly, some reforms that probably need to be made to the current system as well. Yeah. So here's some fun stuff from the Chant of Light, the commandments of the Maker. These truths the Maker has revealed to me. As there is but one world, one life, one death, there is but one God, and he is our Maker. They are sinners who have given their love to false gods. Magic exists to serve man and never to rule over him. Foul and corrupt are they who have taken his gift and turned it against his children. They shall be named Maleficar, accursed ones. They shall find no rest in this world or beyond. All men are the work of our Maker's hands, from the lowest slaves to the highest kings. Those who bring harm without provocation to the least of his children are hated and accursed by the Maker. Those who bear false witness and work to deceive others know this: there is but one truth. All things are known to our Maker, and he shall judge their lies. All things in this world are finite. What one man gains, another has lost. Those who steal from their brothers and sisters do harm to their livelihood and to their peace of mind. Our Maker sees this with a heavy heart. There we go. Here's some more fun stuff on the Maker. There was no word for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, and the first word, and his word became all that might be, dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. And from it made his firstborn, and he said to them, In my image I forge you, to you I give dominion over all that exists. By your will may all things be done. Then in the center of heaven he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne and sang hymns of praise unending, but their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with the golden light reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, In my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done, yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, Here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world given new life. And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, To you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the golden city, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. So there you go. That's the creation myth according to the Chant of Light. Yeah, interesting stuff. Let's look at Chantry hierarchy. So the Divine is the titular head of the Chantry, although since the schism split the Imperial Chantry into its own faction, there are now in fact 2 Divines at any one time. One Divine, informally called the White Divine, is a woman housed in the Grand Cathedral in Val Royeaux. The other, known as the Black Divine, is a man housed in the Argent Spire in Minrathous. Neither divine recognizes the existence of the other, and the informal names are considered sacrilegious. No matter the gender, a divine is addressed as Most Holy or Your Perfection. Beneath the rank of divine is the Grand Cleric. Each Grand Cleric presides over numerous chantries and represents the highest religious authority for their region. They travel to Val Royeaux when the College of Clerics convenes, but otherwise remain where they are assigned. All Grand Clerics are addressed as Your Grace. Kirkwall has a Grand Cleric, the Grand Cleric presumably of the Free Marches. Her name is Alfina. We'll be meeting her later. Beneath the Grand Cleric, we have seen her before in Act 1, we did. We'll be talking to her some more this time, though, in this act. Anyway, beneath the Grand Cleric is the Mother, or in the Imperial Chantry, the Father. If a mother is in charge of a particular chantry, revered is appended to her title. These are the priests responsible for administering to the spiritual well-being of their flock. A mother or revered mother is addressed as Your Reverence. Brothers and sisters form the rank and file of the chantry and consist of 3 main groups: affirmed, initiates, and clerics. Affirmed are the lay brethren of the chantry, those regular folk who have turned to the chantry for succor. Often they are people who have led a difficult or irreligious life and have chosen to go into seclusion, or even orphans and similar unfortunates who were raised into the chantry life. The affirmed take care of the chantry and are in turn afforded a life of quiet contemplation, no questions asked. Only those folk who take vows become initiates. These are men and women in training, whether in academic knowledge or the martial skills of a warrior. All initiates receive an academic education, although only those who seek to become Templars learn how to fight in addition. Clerics are the true academics of the chantry, those men and women who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of knowledge. They are often found in chantry archives, sages presiding over libraries of books and arcane knowledge. The most senior of these clerics, placed in charge of such archives, are given the title Elder, although such a rank is still beneath that of Mother. All other brothers and sisters are addressed simply by noting their title before their name, such as Brother Genitivi. So that's interesting. So if you decide to become an initiate, anybody can theoretically become an initiate if you take vows, and everybody who does receives an academic education. So you're going to learn to read and write, and you're going to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? If you become an initiate. Of course, this is very closely related to if you're familiar with like medieval European history. The chantry is basically an XP of the medieval Catholic Church, this is pretty accurate to that. Basically, the best way for an average Joe to get any kind of education in the Middle Ages was to join the church. And the only real difference here is that in this case, women actually have a higher standing in the chantry than they did in the medieval Catholic Church. It's kind of like the genders are kind of switched around a little bit. But, you could certainly become a nun and you could get an education that way. All right. So Templars. Let's learn a little more about Templars. Why not, right? I have no idea why my phone isn't. Okay, fine. Anyway, often portrayed as stoic and grim, the Order of Templars was created as the martial arm of the chantry. Armed with the ability to dispel and resist magic, in addition to their formidable combat talents, the Templars are uniquely qualified to act as both a foil for apostates, mages who refuse to submit to the authority of the Circle, and a first line of defense against the dark powers of blood mages and abominations. While mages often resent the Templars as symbols of the chantry's control over magic, the people of Theta see them as saviors and holy warriors, champions of all that is good, armed with piety enough to protect the world from the ravages of foul magic. In reality, the chantry's militant arm looks first for skilled warriors with unshakable faith in the Maker, with a flawless moral center as a secondary concern. Templars must carry out their duty with an emotional distance, and the Order of Templars prefers soldiers with religious fervor and absolute loyalty over paragons of virtue who might question orders when it comes time to make difficult choices. Yeah, and this is really where the Templars fall apart, if we're being perfectly honest here. The Templars' power derives from the substance lyrium, a mineral believed to be the raw element of creation. While mages use lyrium in their arcane spells and rituals, Templars ingest the primordial mineral to enhance their abilities to resist and dispel magic. Lyrium use is regulated by the chantry, but some Templars suffer from lyrium addiction. Actually, all of them do, pretty much. The effects of which include paranoia, obsession, and dementia. Templars knowingly submit themselves to this treatment in the service of the Order and the Maker. It is this sense of ruthless piety that most frightens mages when they draw the Templars' attention. When the Templars are sent to eliminate a possible blood mage, there is no reasoning with them, and if the Templars are prepared, the mage's magic is all but useless. Driven by their faith, the Templars are one of the most feared and respected forces in Thedas. So that's interesting. It was written by a first enchanter, so it's written by a mage living in a circle, so someone who has intimate knowledge of Templars, but from the other side. Here's a really interesting Codex entry on the founding of the Chantry. Chantry history, of course, is fascinating. Cordelis Draken, king of the city-state of Orlais, was a man of uncommon ambition. In the year -15 Ancient, the young king began construction of a great temple dedicated to the Maker, and declared that by its completion he would not only have united the warring city-states of the south, he would have brought Andrastian belief to the world. In -3 Ancient, the temple was completed. There, in its heart, Drakon knelt before the eternal flame of Andraste and was crowned ruler of the Empire of Orlais. His first act as emperor, to declare the Chantry as the established Andrastian religion of the Empire. It took 3 years and several hundred votes before Olessa of Monsimard was elected to lead the new Chantry. Upon her coronation as divine, she took the name Justinia in honor of the disciple who recorded Andraste's songs. In that moment, the ancient era ended and the divine age began. So, and that was a very long time ago, 900 years ago, actually. So yeah, it's really interesting that the history of the Chantry is actually very intimately tied up with the history of Orlais. That Drakon was essentially Drakon was the founder of the Chantry and also the first emperor of Orlais is kind of significant, I think. And you can see a significant Orlesian bias in the Southern Chantry quite frequently, to be honest. In fact, the entire Exalted March of the Dales is kind of arguable whether it even was an Exalted March, because it was actually basically just the divine leading an army of Orlesians, sending an army of Orlesians against the elves, and it wasn't like an international cooperation thing. It was mostly just an Orlesian war that was given the rubber stamp by the divine at the time. As opposed to being what you might consider an actual Exalted March, if you could consider any Exalted March to be legitimate in the first place. Okay. Let's read about the hierarchy of the circle. Yeah. It is no simple matter, safeguarding ordinary men from mages and mages from themselves. Each circle tower must have some measure of self-government, for it is ever the Maker's will that men be given the power to take responsibility for our own actions, to sin and fail, as well as to achieve the highest grace and glory on our own strength. You, who will be tasked with the protection of the circle, must be aware of its workings. The first enchanter is the heart of any tower. He will determine the course his circle will take. He will choose which apprentices may be tested and made full mages, and you will work most closely with him. Assisting the first enchanter will be the senior enchanters, a small council of the most trusted and experienced magi in the tower. From this group, the next first enchanter is always chosen. Beneath the council are the enchanters. These are the teachers and mentors of the tower, and you must get to know them in order to keep your finger on the pulse of the circle, for the enchanters will always know what is happening among the children. All those who have passed their harrowing but have not taken apprentices are mages. This is where most trouble in a circle lies, in the idleness and inexperience of youth. The untested apprentices are the most numerous denizens of any tower, but they more often pose threats to themselves, due to their lack of training, than to anyone else. So yeah, that's interesting, and I think also pretty accurate. Untrained apprentices are always going to be more of a danger to themselves than other people, but it's the ones who pass their harrowing but don't yet maybe necessarily have any kind of occupation that are probably going to be the most inclined towards sedition, if you want to call it that. Let's do one more here, the history of the circle. It is a truth universally acknowledged that nothing is more successful at inspiring a person to mischief as being told not to do something. Unfortunately, the chantry of the Divine Age had some trouble with obvious truths. Although it did not outlaw magic, quite the contrary, as the chantry relied upon magic to kindle the eternal flame which burns in every brazier and every chantry, it relegated mages to lighting candles and lamps and perhaps occasional dusting of rafters and eaves. I will give my readers a moment to contemplate how well such a role satisfied the mages of the time. Yeah, that would have been terrible. Like, being stuck in a circle might be boring, but that would have been awful. So yeah, it surprised absolutely no one when the mages of Valroyo, in protest, snuffed the sacred flames of the cathedral and barricaded themselves inside the choir loft. No one, that is, but Divine Ambrosia II, who was outraged and attempted to order an exalted march upon her own cathedral. Even her most devout Templars discouraged that idea. For 21 days, the fires remained unlit while negotiations were conducted, legend tells us, by shouting back and forth from the loft. The mages went cheerfully into exile in a remote fortress outside of the capital, where they would be kept under the watchful eye of the Templars and a council of their own elder magi. Outside of normal society and outside of the chantry, the mages would form their own closed society, the Circle, separated for the first time in human history. I think this is also a really interesting story, because it reminds us that the Circle is actually... It was actually considered to be a good thing. Like, the mages actually... This was something that mages actually wanted in its original form. Like, this is how they wanted it to be. It was sort of like... They would... like, the choice at the time was basically be stuck in the chantry lighting candles every day. Or you could go to the Circle and you could learn better... You could learn cooler magic stuff and be separated from the rest of... from pretty much the rest of the general population. It's kind of a shitty choice, but that was the choice they had. And so they went willingly, according at least to Sister Petrine and the legends. But who knows how it actually went down. So anyway, I think that's probably enough Codex for the moment. There's still... Oh my god, there's so much, though. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of Codex, you guys. But we'll leave it here for now, I think. As always, if you like what you see, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode. Later!